Good morning, everyone. We have a stacked lineup for you today. We are talking about Oscars 2019 because Oscars 2018 didn't just happen. Also, clearly, Michael Bay has a thing for cinematic robots, and oh, those Ready Player One posters, get ready for it. On top of that, today is a very special edition of Movie Talk because if you didn't know, you should know. Today is International Women's Day. It is a global day of celebrating all of the political, social, economic, cultural achievements of women across the world in your lives. And that is what we are doing here today because we're sitting here talking about things we love, things that make us pumped. And I am in such good company. So T, Emma, Wendy, thank you guys so much for joining me. We are rolling right into this lineup because we had some pretty big breaking news drop this morning. In case you need another Star Wars update, because we don't have enough Star Wars coming our way in the very near future, Lucasfilm just announced that Jon Favreau has signed on to executive produce and write a new live-action Star Wars TV series for Disney's upcoming streaming service. Kathleen Kennedy expressed how excited she was that he was joining the team, and she also said, "This series will allow Jon the chance to work with a diverse group of writers and directors and give Lucasfilm the opportunity to build a robust talent base." So, Emma, I'm tossing this to you right off the bat here. First off, just the most obvious question. Is Jon Favreau the right person to spearhead a Star Wars TV series?
Listen, I am a big fan of Jon Favreau. I enjoy the Iron Man films. I think that he is a cool guy. I love that we had a whole sort of montage of him with cool people like Donald Glover, who's already attached to Star Wars. I feel very sort of neutral about this, to be completely honest. I think that it's interesting that, Lucasfilm decided to choose International Women's Day to announce that another white man was going to be producing something for them. Again, I know that doesn't mean that there's not necessarily going to be diverse writers or directors or actors in the film. I want to trust that there's going to be, but at this point, I'm just hearing another announcement that's like, white person working on Star Wars.
Yeah, it's an understandable reaction. We all know how talented Jon Favreau is. He's had a lot of experience working with Disney. I mean, he is the director of Iron Man. He did come up with Kevin Feige for the idea of adding in the Tony Stark thing to the end of Iron Man, and that kind of kicked off the connectivity we see to this day. So it is very exciting.
Absolutely.
It's a fair point, though.
Right.
I'm not backtracking on your point at all. It's a strange day to have chosen to make this announcement.
Yes.
And while I do appreciate the quote of adding more diversity to the Star Wars film franchise and now these TV series that could be on the streaming service, you still have a white male spearheading something where, yes, female directors can be populated underneath them, but
absolutely,
I wouldn't have minded a announcement where a female filmmaker that I'm very excited about was the one in charge of it all. T, I gotta ask you now. So I know that you do not foam at the mouth for Star Wars quite like I do, but does Jon Favreau's involvement pique your interest at all with this show?
Sure, great. Go do it. Go do the Star Wars show. It's fantastic. I do think the timing little sus, little questionable, but whatever. They're gonna do what they're gonna do over at Disney. He has arguably been a linchpin in shaping the MCU as it is now and helping it to become what it is now with what he did with Iron Man. So I can understand why he is a bit of a golden boy in the Mouse House over at Disney Marvel. So yeah, I understand their thinking. I just question their timing of announcing it.
Absolutely. All right, to spin it in another direction right now, Wendy, this is obviously a TV series. We're on Movie Talk right now. This TV series somehow will have to fit into the events of the film franchise, even though the Skywalker saga is coming to a close. Where do you think this show could possibly fit into the Star Wars film franchise timeline?
I mean, I would, this would be going backwards if I chose Knights of the Republic, completely going back from where we were, but I really would have liked to see someone take a handle on that. But if we're gonna move forward, I think I would like to see more with, if we're ending the Skywalker saga, I think we should do a spin-off on possibly, and I kind of want to go back in time because there's certain side characters that we liked so much in these movies that have come out recently, like Admiral
Radis?
No.
No.
She did
Oh, Vice Admiral Holdo.
Yes, I
Laura
really,
Dern.
'cause
Heck yeah,
because
more Laura
when you guys
Dern.
were thinking, when you guys were talking about more females, and immediately my mind went to her because I just liked her so much, and we just got, aside from the book, we just got a small portion of her, and a lot of people were dissatisfied, saying like, oh, we didn't need her in this movie, or we could have gone a different direction. Somebody else could have
Yeah.
done that, and I just have so much love for her that we could have explored that a little bit more.
No, it's a fair point to bring up. I'm curious to see if they take this TV series and they just veer in a completely different direction. We don't touch any familiar characters, anything like that. And when Old Republic comes to mind, I feel like, given Game of Thrones,
Right.
that is best suited to Benioff and Weiss. So when I think about what Jon Favreau can do, I mean, if you've watched the end of Rebels, there are a lot of threads
Sure.
worth exploring at the end of that, and that's kind of what I
And
want.
I think that's the thing, is that even within the Star Wars timeline that we already have, that we've already seen, we've only seen a very small portion of it because we're very focused on the Skywalker saga and also, directly what Leia is doing within the rebellion. So I think even in that timeline, there's interesting things to be explored. And as we say, Jon Favreau, obviously somebody that is good at kind of connectivity. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
So you guys saying that you would want, even though Rebel, we all know it just ended, you would like to see Favreau continue on that story in a live action?
So as that
sense?
thought dribbled out of my mouth just now, what I did think was, so Dave Filoni is very skilled when it comes to animated. He's proved himself time and time again. I would like to see what he can do in the live action realm.
You and me
Maybe
both.
maybe a good stepping stone could be having someone like Favreau oversee his first go at a live action piece. And we know that he wants to hold tight to certain characters that are so beloved right now. So maybe this setup could be what best suits his stepping into the live action realm.
I mean, anything that'll get more eyes on Dave. I know I'm now contradicting myself because I'm like, I want Dave Filoni to direct this, another white man. But I mean, he's done incredible work on both Clone Wars and Rebels, and he just really gets Star Wars, I think, in a very satisfying way, and explores the canon and the possibilities in interesting ways. And I think that a lot of people overlook his work because it is animated, and anything that'll get more eyes on what he does, I'm for.
He also created some of the best Star Wars female characters I've ever seen that I am fully in love with right now.
100%.
All right, so now we're going on to our first main topic of the day. Deadline recently asked Christopher Nolan what movie he thinks might be a sure bet for a Best Picture nomination at next year's Oscar ceremony, and Nolan actually predicted that it would be Black Panther. If that happens, it would finally be the first superhero movie to be considered for Best Picture. So I know it sounds crazy. The Oscars just came and went. We're already talking about next year. But Black Panther, I think, is a special case. And I think it's something that Christopher Nolan, of all people, is the one that's coming out and is already advocating on the film's behalf. So, Wendy, if you had to make an Oscar prediction for 2019 right now, do you think Black Panther has a shot of a Best Picture nod? And does Christopher Nolan's comments give you even more faith in that?
I feel like if a director such as Christopher Nolan's giving Black Panther that praise, heck yeah, that comment has a lot of weight, and there's nothing more I would love to see a movie, not just any comic book movie, but Black Panther being nominated for Best Picture. And I was like, I'm just thinking back to past comic book movies that I feel like could have been nominated. Logan comes to mind, The Dark Knight comes to mind, and I am hoping that maybe the Academy kind of steers away from, I don't want to call them boring films, they're not boring, but like
Traditional
films,
Oscar
thank you,
picks.
yeah. And it just, let's go away from it. It's 2019, let's put a comic book movie up there. Black Panther is like crushing it, more than crushing it at the box office.
So yes, Black Panther is a comic book movie, but T, you said something earlier that really struck me, because I do think this is part of the reason why this isn't something to just roll your eyes at because we're so far away. This seems like a legit possibility to me. So do you want to toss that in here?
Absolutely. It's something that I hadn't really thought about necessarily. And if you had asked me this same question as recently as 2 to 3 years ago, I'd probably be like, probably not. However, for example, this year, a big awards nominee, and it ultimately took home the screenplay for Best Original with Jordan Peele, Get Out. When Get Out came out last year, it came out at a time of year that's generally not ideal. It's not the most fertile time of year for Oscar and awards recognition. It came out in the first quarter, and that's usually when people use like that time of the year as kind of a dumping ground for movies that aren't very good. But it managed to somehow create enough buzz that carried through to the end of the year that actually did get awards recognition. And I think having someone like Christopher Nolan kind of plant that seed, he's got a lot of influence, and influence is currency. And I think that the cultural phenomenon of Black Panther, the fact that it's actually legitimately good, it's not another paint by numbers Marvel movie, I think it could actually happen. Will it win? No. But I think it would be a groundbreaking nomination at least.
I am totally in agreement with you, and I think that Black Panther has a chance at actually making this happen from so many different angles, because you had all the buzz with Wonder Woman this year. You have a movie like Get Out actually getting some serious recognition at the ceremony.
Right.
Take into consideration the fact that Logan has a screenplay nomination. I think those are just signs that we're ready for this. This is something that could happen. And even when you take all of that out of the equation, Black Panther has earned this recognition all on its own. And yes, of course, we don't know what is coming our way for the rest of the year. For all I know, we could have a 2018 filled with dozens of Academy Award potential movies. But at this point in time, it is very difficult for me to imagine, one, based on quality, two, based on box office, three, based on how many people have risen up around this movie to support it, Black Panther not getting some sort of recognition at the Academy Awards. But at this point in time, I am willing to put some money on this movie actually getting that Best Picture nod as well, especially when we have reports coming from Deadline that Disney is busy preparing, I guess, for some sort of campaign behind both Black Panther and then also Mary Poppins Returns too. So is that enough to convince you, Emma, that Black Panther does have a shot?
Listen, Black Panther on its own is enough to convince me that it's got a shot at an Oscar, because this is the thing is, yes, it is absolutely part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, you have to take into consideration the fact that Black Panther stands very well on its own as a film. If you had not seen any other movies in the MCU, they recap what happened to T'Challa when we were introduced to him in Captain America: Civil War. So you really don't even need to have seen that to understand this film. And just, it's a beautiful ensemble performance, and it really celebrates all these different African cultures in a really significant way. And I think that it's a great film that has a wonderful social message for our time. And man, there were so many women in that film. Good on you, Marvel. I loved it.
Oh, so that is what we think about Black Panther's Oscar predictions. Why don't you guys hit that comment section below? Tell us whether you think it's got a shot or not. Moving on to our next story now. We've got Variety reporting that Michael Bay has solidified his next two projects. No, not Lobo. The first is an action movie called Six Underground, which is based on a screenplay by Zombieland and Deadpool screenwriters Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick. After that, Bay is back to killer robots, with the director eyeing the long in development Steven Spielberg project Robo Apocalypse, which is based on the book by Daniel Wilson, in which artificial intelligence comes online and threatens a robot apocalypse. So, yeah, I felt pretty good when I read this news, because I didn't really want Michael Bay getting anywhere close to a DC property right now. But to hear that not his next project, but possibly the one after it, is yet more big screen robots, that kind of like made me want to push snooze a little, because he's clearly done some great work when he's veered off course a little more. Like, you know, we could talk about Pain and Gain, something like that. He can do other things, and I was hoping that that was the direction he would go in after he wrapped up Transformers, but it does not seem like this is going to be the case. So, T, how do you feel about Six Underground and also Robo Apocalypse?
Well, I mean, Six Underground, it's a little too soon to say much about it because we know next to nothing. So I'm gonna get angry when the time is right about that. But when it comes to Robopocalypse, I mean, I really liked this premise when it was called Terminator. I mean, we'll see what Michael Bay does with it. You know, this is a long-standing project. I think Steven Spielberg was directing at one point, and he had even cast it and then just kind of abruptly walked away, from what I understand. So we'll see what Michael Bay does with it. You know, more robots, more Michael Bay. Sure, fine, whatever. I'm sure it'll do amazingly internationally.
Yeah, I was a little more excited about the project when it was Steven Spielberg's priority, but then he had to let it go because it wasn't ready. So, Wendy, I'm going to pose this question to you. Should Michael Bay's Robo Apocalypse pan out, Steven Spielberg was able to say, all right, this script isn't ready. Don't jump in and make a multi-million-dollar movie if a script isn't ready. Do you think that Michael Bay will have that same restraint?
Absolutely not. I feel like Michael Bay is just like, give it all to me now, more explosions, more CGI, and more robots. And I could not be less excited for these news. I know we don't know much about Six Underground, so there's nothing we can go on by that. I'm excited for like Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick to write it because I like their stuff and I like Zombieland. But like to hear that he's taking on yet another robot movie. I mean, this will make John Roca happy, I guess. But I was reading the news last night. I was like, I just scroll past it so quick. I just want to see Michael Bay take on something else besides CGI heavy explosion stuff. He can do more. We've seen him do it before. What happened? Like, why is he? Is it because it's like an easy check?
I think it's because Will Smith doesn't want to do Bad Boys 3.
Oh, bummer.
There you go.
Bummer.
Get it together, Will Smith. You could save us all.
Yeah, you bring up Terminator. I haven't read the Robo-Apocalypse book yet. It's been yet another one that's been sitting on my phone since it was first announced, because I hear the news and then I buy these things and then I wait until they're green lit, so I don't read it way back when, and then I'm waiting 5 to 10 years and I still haven't seen the movie. But, the idea of AI taking over, especially nowadays when we have so much stuff out there. I mean, I walk around with my phone looks at my face now. It knows my face. That's kind of creepy. So is it worth an adaptation of this still?
I mean, it's interesting. I was doing a little research on the book because I have not read it as well. And it seems to me that the concept is interesting. Obviously, the idea of AI taking over is not necessarily that far-fetched. But it seems that the book has very mixed reviews in a way that if Steven Spielberg was handling it, it would probably be a little bit more psychological and about the relationship between humans and this artificial intelligence that, essentially wiped them out, and what are the implications of that? What does that all mean? But with Michael Bay, it's most likely just going to be lots of CGI explosions.
Okay, this is a stretch then, but does anybody on the panel believe that after working on the Transformers film franchise for so long, which is really all about flashy robots that, people love seeing the Autobots and Decepticons in action, but movies that have had little character development, little depth, do you think that him jumping into a similar sphere might be what he needs to kind of give him that push to creating a robot cinematic world with more depth to it?
I'm not
I'm looking at the most unconvinced faces right now.
Listen, I want to believe that is possible, but I think that in order to do that, Michael Bay is going to have to go do something completely different and then come back to it.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I don't see him being able to be like, this is going to be my Merchant Ivory robot movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he's just going to lather, rinse, repeat, because I think he has a lot of people to answer to when he takes on these big budget projects, and that also limits his freedom creatively because they need to make that money overseas. I mean, I've said this before, but Michael Bay stopped making movies for us a long time ago. These movies are for the international market.
Yep.
That's true.
All right, well, you guys made this transition really easy. From Michael Bay Grinches to the Grinch from Illumination. Universal and Illumination have unveiled a new poster and a trailer for the upcoming Grinch movie. The new animated adaptation of the Dr. Seuss classics comes from the studio that brought us Despicable Me, The Lorax, Secret Life of Pets, and it features the voice of Benedict Cumberbatch as the Grinch. It's got a release date set for November 9th. So we were all scrambling to watch this morning because it came out a little after 8 a.m., and I'll just put it out there. I was pleasantly surprised. You look pretty happy but I feel like the second the Illumination Minion logo comes up, you're going to make Wendy Lee happy.
Yeah, just because I have a fondness for the Minions. I think they're I did not like the Minion movie. Just put that out there. I thought it was bad, but I like the Despicable Me's, and I feel like Illumination gets it. They get kid comedy and they get cartoons. And with the Grinch, I think he looks adorable. And what made me laugh the most was when the alarm clock went off, and it was for I Was Happy came out. Now, if you work at Universal and if you work at the character department, if you happen to be Minion height, you hear that song day in and day out. And when the fact that every time you hit that alarm with a book or an object and it kept on coming back, that was like my life 4 years ago. I was in a Minion and listening to the song 8 hours a day. Yeah.
So Emma, did the trailer do it for you? Do we need another Grinch movie?
I'm right there with Wendy on the happy because, oh my goodness, there was a time where that was the only hold music we had at Universal also. So every time the phones were on hold, you just heard happy. So the Grinch having that be his alarm clock, that really spoke to me on a personal level. Here's the thing. I think the animation looks adorable. I love the animation style. I love the way all the little Who's look. Yeah. I didn't necessarily know that it was going to be kind of how the Grinch Stole Christmas again, but it feels like that's what it's going to be. It's coming out in November. So, this is the thing is I feel like Illumination almost gets there with their films a lot of the time. And The Grinch is a good opportunity for them to have a movie that really does have some emotional gravitas to it. And I think that, Benedict Cumberbatch voicing the Grinch is a really funny idea. I enjoy him as an actor. From what I've seen from the trailer, though, unfortunately to me, this looks like typical Illumination, lots of kid humor, not really going for the deeper cuts. And I hope that I am wrong.
I can hear why you would say that. I'm hopeful that this is just a first trailer, though, because the trailer mainly focuses on reintroducing you to the Grinch, to his living situation, and then to Whoville as well. And you know what? Your point about Illumination almost getting there feels so valid to me. And I can't tell if it's fair or not because Illumination, they're up against Disney Animation, they're up against Pixar, and those two companies have a knack for making very kid-friendly films that send good messages, but also movies with a more intellectual side that really appeal to adults. And Illumination hasn't quite done that, but I don't even know if that is their intention because their movies are all filled with color and big bubbly jokes, and it's clearly worked really well for them. And while I don't think any of their films carry the emotional weight of some of the films from the other companies I just mentioned, I can't deny having had a blast in Sing, Secret Life of Pets. I kind of enjoyed the Minion movies, and Despicable Me started off real strong, and I don't think it crashed and burned per se, but the other two movies are just not as good as the first. But this does feel like an Illumination take on it, but I think I'm kind of open to that, especially when you hear that music and you hear the story and you see the Grinch's behavior. There's a reason the story is a classic, and even though it's only March right now, I just get that warm, fuzzy Christmas feeling again watching this. T, do you share my excitement for the Grinch?
I mean, warm and fuzzy is spot on. I generally stay away from most of the kids' movies nowadays just because very few of them are able to toe the line of making jokes for the kids and for the adults, and I can't be bothered if it's purely kid jokes the whole time. Not to mention, ever since the advent of CG animation, it always has just felt a little bit cold to me. There's something that I love, like I grew up with like The Lion King and stuff like that, so that's what I love. I love drawn animation, and CG, I've just never fully connected with it in the same way, but watching this trailer, I found myself smiling a lot more than I was expecting to because he just looks so warm and fuzzy and cuddly and cute. They really did a great job.
The animation looks really good.
It looks great. Like, it's got great texture. It gives you that sort of like scruffy feel that you have in the original drawn Grinch cartoon. It does give me the impression that it's also going to be How the Grinch Stole Christmas because of the release date, but we are seeing, other opportunities for them to maybe build that story out and tweak it a bit with some of the things we saw in this trailer because obviously they have to fill 90 minutes and the original cartoon is like 20. I do low-key miss the original voice, like the guy who did Tony the Tiger and the singing on the original. I forget his name, and I'm sorry about that. But I am actually looking forward to checking this one out. This might be one of the rare occasions that I actually do go and see a kid's movie.
All right. So from a little bit of a high right here to a conversation that I have a feeling is going to go in a really interesting direction. We're talking about some Ready Player One character posters. We got a new set of them from the Steven Spielberg movie. The adaptation follows Wade Watts, an unlikely hero in the virtual world of the Oasis, where he and anyone else can be whomever. Oh, I hear the moans around me. But everyone in the Oasis must protect their online lives from an evil company that wants to control the Oasis and monetize it. This movie is due out on March 29th. And yeah, that promotional campaign has ramped up recently big time with a whole lot of posters. The newest posters are these character posters where you see the live action version of the characters with their avatar behind them. First, let's start with those. Wendy, are you okay with how these avatars are looking? Are you not feeling them?
When I first saw them in the trailer, I've been kind of excited to see it, but it's not how I imagined from reading the book. It looks very different. It's got like a mix of to me, like Final Fantasy mixed with something else. And it's just like, it's okay, I guess. I want to see them in action a little bit more before I completely judge it. It's just, I think I'm holding on really hard to my love for the books, and I don't want to quite ready to bash these avatars. The posters is a whole other story, but I'm not 100% in love with them. I'll say that.
Well, it's a fair point to bring
Yeah.
up because I think the three of us have all read the book, and
Yes.
I like the book quite a bit. So you do always have to ask yourself, are you holding on to the book too much? Because when you adapt something to film, it's a new medium. It requires certain changes. But given what I've seen on the promotional campaign so far, it's not that the avatars not looking like how I picture them is bothering me as much. It's more so what it takes away from the essence of the movie
Yes.
by showing us this right now. Because a big part of being in the Oasis is having the opportunity to not be who you are in real life.
Yeah.
And now that we've seen some of the reveals of the avatars paired with their live action character, it's gonna, I would imagine at least, it would take away from the emotional journey of coming to realize that this avatar you've interacted with in a certain way, that you've placed these certain characteristics on without really knowing the person. Oh, hey, in real life, that person is someone completely different. So I think that's what's bothering me more so than anything. But T, you haven't read the book. So
I have not.
coming from it, from that perspective, what do you think of these posters?
They just look, well, for one thing, just to springboard off Wendy's point, I think whenever any adaptation occurs that's based on a book, especially a beloved book, you're going to run into that issue of people being upset because, I mean, this even happened with Harry Potter. It's like, that's not how I pictured Ron. That's not how I pictured Hermione. And you kind of have to adapt to what you can actually do in real life and translate it. With this, you know, I don't know the source material at all. I was mostly just shocked by how bad these posters are. Because when you guys were telling me that, oh, these posters came out, people are not feeling them, and they're actually doing like spoof fan art based off of these posters, and you started showing me, I was just like, okay, but where are the real ones? You're like, these are the real ones. These are not the fan art joke ones. And I couldn't believe it. So this is not getting me hyped for the movie at all.
Yeah, so we've seen two sets of posters right now. We've got the most recent character posters, and then there are these nostalgia throwback style posters. Just cut to Emma's face
There
right
are,
now.
Listen, here's the thing. I am trying to go into this movie with an open mind. I read the book. I feel I liked the book. I'm not like really emotionally attached to it. But one of the things that was cool about the book was this very sort of deep 80s nostalgia. I really like the beginning part, which features an old D&D module that I actually played as a kid. But the thing is obviously you were going to have a difficult time getting the rights to everything. So instead, they're leaning real hard into Warner Brothers, and they're leaning real hard into Steven Spielberg's properties, because obviously that is something that they have access to. Oh boy, these posters, they look like bad Photoshop jobs. I mean, I have yet to see a post. I mean, again, I'm trying to keep an open mind about it, but this advertising campaign, what is happening? Who approved any of this? Because it all looks like bad Photoshop.
Yeah, these posters in particular, I think, are what are most alarming to me. But on the bright side, it's kind of invigorated this meme, this flood of
my
memes
goodness,
on Twitter
yes.
and social media right now that I am just loving. I think of all those posters that came out, the ones that give me the most nightmares are probably the Breakfast Club one.
Oof.
That is probably the worst of the worst. And then the Beetlejuice one is equally
It's
nightmarish.
really terrible.
But, you know, you bring up the Photoshop comment, and who knows how they really made
I know.
those images. Maybe someone did do a hand rendering of them, and then they
Sure.
were or a rendering in a digital tool. But you have people basically taking a cue from that comment, and now there's so many other renditions of these posters with like crude cutouts of the
You
avatar's
guys,
faces
if you
placed
have
on
not
inappropriate
seen
posters.
Kramer versus Ready Player One, give it a googs right now. Just
Yeah.
Google it, check it out. It'll make your life better.
A question very worth posing right now, though, is this is a marketing campaign, and even though some marketing campaigns are indicative of the quality of a final film and what you're ultimately going to see, it isn't always necessarily the case. A marketing department at Warner Brothers could have just sat down and said, what is the best way to get the widest possible audience for this movie, whether you're talking about folks who are attached to the book, younger moviegoers, older moviegoers who know these properties. So, Wendy, I saw you nod before. So,
Yeah.
what do you take from this campaign right now? Is this a sign that Ready Player One might not quite get there?
I'm starting to fear that a lot more, because initially I was so excited when I saw the first teaser trailer to like even the first one up to the Come With Me, where I've been really liking it. But what I've noticed in these trailers is that they're not really going by the book. The book heavily references the 80s. So if it seems like they're going away from that a little bit more in the movie. Now the posters are referring to the 80s. So as a viewer who has no idea about the source material, they're gonna look at the trailers and they're gonna look at these posters and they're like, why do I care that these are mimicking The Matrix and all these other, you know what I mean? And like for like the Breakfast Club and Lost Boys.
The Lost Boys is the worst.
The Lost Boys one is rough.
Awful.
That one
So
actually makes me
what
angry.
I worry about, like as a reader of the book, I get why they chose to do the things that they did. I don't like it, but I understand it. But if you're trying to cast a wider net for new audiences, they're gonna look at it and they go, what is this? What is this? I'm not gonna give my money to this. I'm gonna wait until it comes out later after the opening weekend, and then there goes all your money because now it's all gonna go to concession.
I totally agree. It's a very confused message because you bring up, Wendy, this idea that, we have all of these 80s posters and then randomly we have The Matrix. That's not an 80s
That's
film.
not 90s.
Yeah.
And that's so indicative of what I've seen out of this film so far in terms of, the advertising, that because they're not really leaning into the 80s thing. And it's also very different to read about all of these pop culture references on a page and then to be visually assaulted with all of them on a screen, which is kind of the feeling I'm getting thus far.
Okay, question. Did any of you guys see the 80s inspired Stranger Things posters that
Yes.
were released?
Yeah.
Okay, so why do posters like that work and posters like these just completely fall flat on their face?
I think when that Stranger Things poster came out, for one, it was at the time an untested property. People didn't really know what Stranger Things was. And we also hadn't seen an illustrated movie poster like that in years. So I think they really tapped into that, hey, remember Amblin kind of nostalgia for a lot of people. And that really did tie in perfectly with when the show takes place, the vibe of the show overall, and that Amblin-y feel of Stranger Things. So I think that worked. With this, it's almost like so derivative, which is ironic because it's a Steven Spielberg
Yes.
project.
Yes.
It's just like, how are you going to be derivative of yourself? This is just kind of sad.
No, you absolutely nail it though, T, with the idea that you were saying with Stranger Things, it's a feeling. That's the thing. Stranger Things is a vibe. It invokes the 80s. Whereas with this, they're literally like, we're just gonna throw everything from the 80s
Remember
in there.
Breakfast Club? You
Yeah.
like that, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's just a bunch of references. There's no actual work that's been put into this.
Even the Stranger Things posters that did directly reference older films, it was the way that they were worked into the poster that it captured both the vibe of Stranger Things, but also the vibe of the thing that they're referencing. Whereas why we have this whole Photoshop thing happening right now is because what this string of posters is essentially taking these characters and putting their heads
Correct.
over somebody else's.
Yep.
So there you go. That's where we're at with Ready Player One right now. I still have my fingers crossed. Super tight for that one, though.
Yeah, I mean,
I know. I don't want it to fail or anything
I don't
like
either.
that.
I
Right.
love Steven Spielberg. I think he's a great director. He seemed like the right person to be attached to this project, but everything I've seen out of this project so far just doesn't feel like Spielberg to
Right.
me.
And we haven't seen Steven Spielberg do a movie like this in a very long time. A friend of mine recently said, I feel like Steven Spielberg just kind of makes movies for his generation now.
Yeah.
And that kind of has been the case for the last several years. So when I first started seeing trailers for Ready Player One, I was just like, oh, throwback Spielberg. But maybe he's lost his touch with this sort of genre. Who knows?
I don't know.
I will not believe that yet until this movie proves me wrong. We have one more story to hit today. It was officially announced that Elizabeth Banks signed on as the lead in an untitled horror project produced by James Gunn. Film marks a reunion for the two who worked together on Slither, of course. The H Collective is going to fully finance this one and produce with Gunn and his company, which is called Troll Court Entertainment. It's expected to start filming this spring. So do we have any Slither fans on the panel? Because I most certainly am.
Oh yeah, I love I love James Gunn. I love Elizabeth Banks. This news just delights me. I mean, these are two wonderful human beings that have made a really interesting project together in the past, and I'm all in.
So one of the quotes that I read while they were talking about this, and we got official announcements about this. James Gunn took to Twitter to talk about it even more, and Instagram. He calls this an incredibly intense and different and wild project. When I think about all of James Gunn's projects, how much more wild can he get than what he's already given us? So do you have any expectations for this one, Tay?
I feel like he's still got some weird in him. I think even though he kind of is allowed to be weirder than maybe a lot of other directors who have done Marvel movies have done because he had somewhat of a I mean, before it went on to become what it did. With Guardians, it was a little bit of a lower profile project. They'd let him off the leash a little bit than maybe they would have with a more A-list Marvel property, which he then turned into an A-list Marvel property. With this, I feel like he's got even more leeway to be weird. And I think he's really coming into his own as he gets older, as he gets wiser, as he gets more successful. So I'm definitely excited. And Elizabeth Banks, I've been a fan of since forever. I think she's just so multifaceted in her talents, drama and comedy, and now she's getting into producing and directing. So I'm very excited to see what they do together.
So speaking of James Gunn style weird, we have so many different things, whether you're talking about his writing, directing, producing credits. So I don't know, on a scale from Guardians to Super Wendy, where do you hope this project lands? Is that the two most extreme? I don't know.
Would think so. My inclination was Super would maybe be the most weird that he's done, and dark. Oh, it's really dark,
it's
you
dark.
guys. If you haven't seen Super, oh boy.
I feel like this will lean closer to the Super side for some reason. It's not going to be like the fun, bright, more Guardians type. I think because he's reteaming up with like Elizabeth Banks. And full disclosure, I have not seen Slither, and I feel so ashamed to even call myself a Nathan Fillion fan because I did not realize he was in the movie. And then I looked it up. I was like, what the heck?
It's kind of exciting that you still get to experience
so
Slither for the first
now I get to
time.
watch it
I think you'll like it
over the weekend. So I'm hoping kind of it's in the vein of like something like that, a little gross, a little weird, a little out there. It's gonna be fun.
I'm pretty pumped about this too. I also love the idea that James Gunn is so excited to reteam with Elizabeth Banks, especially the way he talks about their working relationship, that the second she stepped into audition for Slither, something clicked. They're on the same wavelength in some respect. And I think especially, you bring up Elizabeth Banks's behind the scenes credits right now. She is grown quite a bit since Slither, and if they're working together, and I didn't name drop the Hive director who's directing this film. His name is David Yarovesky. I've never seen The Hive, so I'm hopeful that he is the perfect third teammate now for these three, and I'm just curious to see what that log line winds up being, how this grows from here. It's exciting to hear about a project like this too, and know that it's not some like idea that just popped in their head and it dribbled out into the media, but their goal is to start filming this spring. Yeah. So I'm pretty pumped about this one.
Well, and again, you're talking about people who have a good track record together already. And again, it's two people that I think bring a lot of creativity and joy into the projects that they do.
I would agree with that. And right now, before we roll into our plugs, because we're done with our main stories today, I want to remind you that we are going to take some live Twitter questions at the very end of the show. So send those in right now to the Collider Video Twitter account, #Collider Movie Talk. Get on that. And now we have a whole bunch of things to tell you about. There is a Thor Ragnarok commentary up right now that I did with Jay Washington and Roka. We had way too much fun making that video. There's also a championship schmodown match between Rachel Cushing and Sam Levine. You have to get on that. Later today, we have a new episode of Jedi Council, which will obviously feature this new Jon Favreau story. And then also, don't forget, we have that live Schmodown match happening on March 15th at the El Portal Theater. Make sure to hit the description section of this video. That's where you're going to find all the information you need in order to get tickets to that event. So now it is time for our Twitter questions. And we've got one well worth hitting right now from Alessio, who writes to us, I hope you can talk about the runtime for Infinity War being revealed on Collider Video Movie Talk today. Thanks. Yeah, Alessio, we could talk about that big story that just dropped today, and there's a lot of Avengers stuff that we got this morning. So the news is, or at least the reported runtime is, 2 hours and 36 minutes, which would make it the longest MCU movie. I can't tell based on the responses. This is like, oh my God, that's too long to be sitting there. Because to me, any minute that would be added on, I'd be like, oh, give me more, given the fact that we're seeing so many characters in this.
Yeah, in my opinion, if it doesn't feel like it's 2 hours and 36 minutes, then it's a well done movie. It's really more about keeping the pacing correct, making sure your story is tight, making sure that you deliver on performance, action, sequencing, all that stuff. Because the runtime in general, I do love a tight 90, a nice crisp 90-minute movie. I feel like that is a perfect length for a movie. But then again, I love movies like, this could not be more antithetical to Infinity War, but like There Will Be Blood. I went to see that in theaters twice, and that's a super long movie. So it really is about your experience watching it. I feel like a runtime, it's just a number.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with that. And then on top of that, Perry, you do bring up the point that we are juggling a lot of characters, so a long runtime makes sense. But again, I think back to watching Blade Runner 2049 in theaters last year, and somewhere after the 2-hour mark in my brain, I went, wow, this is a long movie. I'd watch 9 more hours of this. So it's just a number.
As long as it'll enhance
I never
the
even
story,
noticed
go
that
for
movie
it.
was over 2 hours.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
that's the first time I even heard that.
Yep.
I love that movie so much, I didn't even
If,
notice.
if a movie is well done, if the pacing is good, you really don't notice the runtime.
Well, that's where the pressure comes in. If you're going to have a runtime like that, you need to earn it, and you need to make every
Yes.
minute have value rather than feel like filler or unnecessary scenes that don't build towards a greater whole. And when you're talking about directors like the Russo brothers, because I believe the second longest MCU movie now is Civil War at 2 hours and 27 minutes. In my opinion, they made every second well worth my time in that. Do you agree, Wendy?
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm fully putting my trust in the Russo brothers, because we were talking about how a movie sometimes shouldn't be judged by its runtime and by how much you're kind of immersing yourself and you're losing yourself in that movie. You don't feel the time goes by, and that's how I felt when I watched Civil Wars. It's the same way I felt with not that Black Panther wasn't a long movie, but I didn't feel that it went by quick. That it wasn't a long movie. So what I want is to literally sit there, and as the credits roll, I went, no, wait, I want more. That's what I want, because we're wrapping everything up, and all these characters are going to get thrown into Infinity War, and I don't really want to see a minute wasted because there's so much to be included.
And I'd rather have a longer runtime than a movie where you can tell they cut things for time, and
Yeah.
then the characters
Yeah.
don't have enough development, or storylines don't have the development they needed just because they were trying to keep the numbers low.
A
Yeah.
very important point to make. We're going to move on to our next Twitter question from, I'm going to pronounce this right, Dora Milajanine. Obviously, I see what she's going for there, but I wanted to make sure I said that right. She asks, what upcoming female-led film has you most excited? So I'll just kick it off with a movie I already brought up today. And I'll be honest, I wasn't really that excited for another Mary Poppins movie. But when you hear how excited the folks at Disney are about it, and the fact that they might be putting some serious time and effort behind an Oscar campaign for that movie, and the report that I did read about that specifically name dropped Emily Blunt. And Emily Blunt, probably ever since I guess Devil Wears Prada, has always been someone who's caught my eye, someone I've been rooting for, someone who has taken on different roles and different projects all across her career. To see her get that kind of recognition in a movie like that, especially a movie with, really so much working against it. We're talking about a classic Disney movie, and she is stepping in and she's taking on the challenge of making a worthwhile sequel to that. Even though it is just a report coming from Deadline, something that writer heard, I am holding on to that idea that her performance in that is really Oscar worthy, and I am so curious to see what they did with that.
Sure, I'm going to echo your sentiments about Mary Poppins completely, especially because looking at it, it seems like, I don't know if anybody else saw the stage production of Mary Poppins. I saw it on the West End before it came over to Broadway back in 2006 or 7. And that musical skewed very heavily towards the Mary Poppins novels in a way that the Julie Andrews film did not. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the Julie Andrews film, but the Mary Poppins novels, they're a lot darker. Mary Poppins is a much more I'm trying to think of the right word. She's a lot more stern and sassy and great. I like the way that they did it in the Julie Andrews film, but I'm so curious because everything I've seen seems like they're skewing more towards the books. And so I'm excited to see also what Emily Blunt brings to the role, because I really enjoy her as an actress.
What you got, Wendy?
It comes to mind for me when you say women in front, and it made me think of Wonder Woman, because I love
Stole the words right out of my mouth.
so good. And in that vein, I want to see more female directors come into light.
Yeah.
We just saw more from Patty Jenkins, more from Ava DuVernay, more.
Well, do you have a female-led movie to add? Because I want to jump right into another Twitter question I got, too.
I was going to say Wonder Woman as well, mainly because of the Kristen Wiig development that we talked about last week on Movie Talk. That's really the thing that's got me sort of a little bit more buzzed about that movie than I might have been otherwise.
I also want to name drop Tomb Raider really quickly, because it is coming up, and talking about another fantastic actress out there who is putting a lot on her shoulders by basically headlining a film that I wouldn't say everybody has the most confidence in, but
Sure.
Alicia Vikander, if anybody, can lead a Tomb Raider movie. The question I wanted to jump into right now comes from Stephen Torpy, and he wrote to us, he wants to hear about great female directors that are not Patty Jenkins and Ava DuVernay. And I don't want to take anything away from what those two women have accomplished, which is something else. But,
Right.
you know, we're talking about them. They're hot names right now, but there are so many other female directors out
Yeah.
there who really deserve the opportunity to be in the spotlight and be in the spotlight on major productions like something on the scale of A Wrinkle in Time, like a DC movie, Marvel movie, or
Yeah.
even just making a smaller independent movie that speaks to what they love most, that really gets the shine it deserves. And the first name I want to throw out there, who I'm really excited to see her next feature, is Jennifer Kent, the
Oh,
director
yeah.
of The Babadook. It feels like we've been waiting too long. The title of her new movie escapes me right now, but it's been a little while since The Babadook, and she is something else, and I'm so glad that she brought Essie Davis out to the public eye, too, because Essie Davis is another super talented actress out there who, again, deserves to be headlining more things, and is someone I'm keeping my eye on right now. Anybody else have any female directors they're watching out for?
I mean, I would like to see a lot more from Greta Gerwig. I think I was so impressed with Lady Bird, and I was so happy for her, Oscar nomination. So I want to see more from her, more from Dee Reese.
Yeah, Dee Reese
Yeah.
is something else. Anybody who's seen Mudbound probably knows that Dee Reese, Mudbound and Pariah. If you haven't seen Pariah, which I believe is her first feature film as a director, please go look that movie up. It is, it just grabs your heart and it squeezes it, and it's a difficult watch, but it's so moving and it's so well done, and I give her all the credit in the world for that. Emma, what you got for us on this one?
I mean, obviously Catherine Bigelow comes to mind,
Oh,
who
yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like for whatever reason, like did one film and that got a lot of Oscar attention and then was completely overlooked after that.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm trying to remember. I feel like there was some news with something with Blumhouse recently that was exciting, but I'm doing research on it as we speak.
We've also
very
got,
professional.
Got Reed Morano, who she shot Meadowland with Olivia Wilde, which I saw at Tribeca a couple years back. And speaking of another tough watch, it's a very difficult watch, but she's clearly a budding director who has a very thorough understanding of her characters, and that's part of the reason why that story was so overwhelmingly powerful. And I forget who she was talking to recently. It might have been Kathleen Kennedy, because it sparked a whole bunch of rumors. Oh, Reed Morano's going to direct a Star Wars movie. I hope she does something like that. I mean, really, with the Jon Favreau news, we could bring in a lot of female directors there, and she seems like one of those people who could be perfect for a gig like that. You want to toss in any names here, T?
Unfortunately, the name of the director I want to shout out is escaping me, and I should remember it because I went to a Q&A that she did after her movie. But if you just look up the movie Embers, it was an indie movie that came out 2 to 3 years ago. It was one of my favorite films of that year, indie or not. Super unique premise, extremely well directed, and I really have been kind of just waiting to see what she does next. But so far,
I don't want to
nothing.
say her name wrong, but Claire Carre?
Yeah, I believe
Is that
that's
it?
how you pronounce it.
I will definitely
she's
check that out.
amazing. Check out Embers if you haven't seen it.
I'll name drop yet another one. Has anybody seen Raw? Julia Ducournau is just an absolutely fantastic director. If you've seen that movie, again, another movie that's so tough to watch, but it's worth every single gory element, creepy element, scare sequence because of how well she represents those two lead characters and what they're going through, their thought process, their relationship as sisters. No doubt she's one to keep an eye on. Have you found your Blumhouse movie?
No, I haven't, but I went on another tangent, which is that this entire season of Jessica Jones, every single episode is directed by a woman. And I think that, this is a really good jumping off point to give a lot of women sort of an entry point into the MCU. And it was interesting. I heard Kristen Ritter describe Jessica Jones as being like that cool indie film you always wanted to work on, but millions and millions of people watch it because it's Marvel. And so I think, we're going to get an opportunity here to see not only all of these women directors perchance get an opportunity to direct something bigger than, say, like an episode for a Netflix series, but it's all women writers also. So Jessica Jones season 2, which I have not watched yet, but the reviews that I've been seeing so far have been very positive. I loved the first season, so there you go. Look it up.
All right, guys, that is all the time we have for movie talk today. But as always, we're going to have so much movie news coming your way all throughout the day. I hope you stick with us to watch all of that. But don't forget, take a moment to celebrate some of the strong, independent, independent, talented, smart women in your life, because I'm doing it right now at this table. Wendy, Emma, T, it really has been an honor hosting the show with you guys on the panel. I love you guys. Thank you to everyone out there watching this episode of Movie Talk. We will see you soon with more movie coverage.
Hey everybody, Mark Ellis here. Thanks for watching this episode of Collider Movie Talk. You want to watch more? Then click up here, or you can click right here for more great content from Collider. And if you haven't subscribed to Collider Video, do so right now and share this vid with your friends. Thanks for watching.